Kneeling in the cool grass at the end of a long day, you hold something small enough to fit in one hand, and without meaning to, you start counting years. By the time this is over, you will know the one thing worth planting after 40, and why waiting for it to grow stops feeling the way waiting used to feel. The thing in your hand is barely taller than the trowel beside it. A few thin roots, pale and a little damp. A stem you could snap without trying. And yet you are looking at it the way you might look at a photograph of someone you will not see again for a long time. Carefully, as if it could tell you something if you held still enough. There is a question sitting in your chest, and you are a little embarrassed by it. Will I be here when this is grown? You never used to ask that. When you were 20, you planted nothing because everything was already supposed to last. Time was a thing you spent without counting, the way you leave a tap running in a house where the water is free. You let whole years pour out and never once looked at the meter. There was no meter, there was just more. Something changed, not all at once. It crept in around the edges of ordinary days. A birthday that landed heavier than the one before. A friend who got news, the kind that arrives in a lowered voice. A morning when your own face in the mirror looked like your parents' face, just for a second, and then looked like yours again, and you stood there longer than you meant to. And here you are, on your knees in the grass, holding a future you may only partly get to see. Most people, when they feel this, do nothing. They feel the weight of it and they set it down. They decide it is too late to start something slow. Why plan a thing that takes 15 years when you are no longer sure of 15 years? So they buy something already finished instead. A grown plant in a big pot delivered to the door. A quick result. A weekend project that ends on the same weekend it began, with everything already done, nothing left owing. It feels like the sensible choice. It feels like making peace with the clock. But a few people do the opposite. They look at the same shrinking number of years and instead of buying something finished, they plant the slowest thing they can find. On purpose, knowing they may never see it whole. And something happens to them that does not happen to anyone else. Something that sounds impossible until you have felt it. Their relationship with time turns inside out. The thing they were dreading, the passing of the years, becomes the thing they look forward to most. I want to tell you what that one slow thing is, and I will. I promise you I will, but not yet, because the name of it will mean almost nothing until you understand what it does to the person who plants it. Say it too early, and you will nod and move on and miss the whole point. So stay with the image for now. The grass going damp under your knees, the small living thing in your open hand, the quiet counting you did not decide to start. Because the counting is where it begins. And what we are going to do slowly is change what you are counting toward. Think back to a single summer when you were a child, and how long one ordinary afternoon could last. You could leave the house after breakfast and come home only when the streetlights buzzed on, and somewhere in between there had been whole expeditions, whole friendships formed and broken and repaired before dinner, whole games invented with rules that mattered enormously and were forgotten by morning. And still the day stretched out ahead of you like a field with no fence at the far end. You could not see where it stopped. Time back then was not something you owned. It was the weather. It was just there, falling on you, more of it arriving every morning whether you asked for it or not. You never thanked it. You never worried about it. Who worries about rain when it has rained every day of your life? Now notice what is different. Notice it honestly without flinching from it. Somewhere after 40, time quietly stops feeling like weather and starts feeling like money. You become aware of a total. You do not know the number. Nobody knows their number, but you can feel that there is one now, and you can feel it sitting closer to spent than to full. The account that once seemed bottomless has a bottom, and on certain evenings you can almost see it. This is not a sad thing, though almost everyone treats it like one. It is simply a change in the math. For the first half of a life, time arrives. It is paid into you. For the second half, time is withdrawn. Same days, same hours, but the direction of the flow has reversed and some part of you has noticed. And the strange part is what that reversal does to your choices. When time felt infinite, you wasted it beautifully. You waited in lines you had no real need to be in. You stayed in rooms you should have walked out of years before. You said you would start the thing next year, and then next year, and then the year after that, because there was always another shelf of years stacked behind the first one, and you could not imagine running low. Now you do something you never used to do. You weigh things. You hold a choice in your hand and you feel its cost. You stand in the garden center on a Saturday, surrounded by the smell of wet soil and bagged compost, and you look at two options on the same shelf. One is a plant already in full flower, instant, finished, yours to enjoy this very afternoon on the patio. The other is a thin bare stick in a plastic pot with a small printed tag that says it will reach its full size in 12 to 15 years. And you feel your hand hesitate over the second one. You feel it physically. Here is the question that hesitation is really asking underneath the surface. It is not, will this grow? Of course it will grow. Things grow. The real question is, will I be here? And underneath even that, a harder one you would never say out loud in a shop. If I will not fully be here to see it, is it still worth my hands today? Most people standing right there put the slow one back on the shelf and walk away toward the flowers. It feels like wisdom. It feels like accepting your limits. But the few who keep holding that thin stick, who carry it to the register knowing the cost, are about to learn something the others never will. Because the moment you choose the slow thing on purpose, time does something it has not done since you were a child running through that endless summer afternoon. It slows back down. It gives some of itself back. I am going to show you exactly how, step by step. But first you have to see the secret math you have already been doing for years, the calculation running quietly under everything, even though you have probably never once said it out loud. There is a calculation almost everyone past a certain age runs in secret, constantly, and almost no one ever admits to. You see a baby across a room, and before you can stop it, your mind does the arithmetic of how old you will be at that child's wedding. You hear someone mention a 30-year mortgage, and a small flat voice in the back of your head finishes the sum before you have agreed to start it. You read somewhere that a certain kind of tree can live 200 years, and you feel a quiet ache land in your chest, because 200 years is a length of time you can love but only ever lend a thin slice of. This is not morbid. This is the most natural thing a human mind can do. It is simply what a mind does the moment it finally understands, really understands, that the supply was never endless. The counting is not the problem. The counting is just honesty arriving late. But here is what the calculation gets wrong, and it gets it wrong in a way that quietly steals years from you. It assumes that the only thing worth planting is a thing you will personally be around to harvest. It measures every slow act by whether the reward lands inside your own remaining years with time to spare. And by that measure, almost nothing slow is ever worth beginning after 40. Why learn the instrument? Why start the long project? Why plant the tree? You will be old or gone before it pays. That measure, followed honestly, empties your hands and tells you it is being kind. Let me give you a single number that breaks the whole trap open. An apple tree planted as a young whip, a bare slender thing no thicker than your thumb, takes around 4 to 7 years before it gives you fruit worth carrying inside in both hands. An oak you push into the ground today will not be a real tree, the kind a child actually climbs, for 30 years or more. By the old math, the apple is a maybe and the oak is a flat no. Do not bother. You will not collect. But sit with this for a moment, really sit in it. The person who planted the oak that shades your street, the one you park under on hot afternoons without a thought, was almost certainly never going to sit beneath it themselves. They knew that on the day they planted it, the shade was never going to be theirs, and they did it anyway. The cool you stand in on a July afternoon is the answer to a question someone asked, silently with their hands, a whole lifetime before you arrived. Look around the next time you walk an old neighborhood, the kind with wide streets and deep shade, and understand that almost none of it was planted by people who got to enjoy it grown. The biggest tree on the block, the one 3 people could not link hands around, went into the ground as a thin whip back when the houses were new, and the street was raw and bare and hot. Someone stood there in that heat, sweating, planting a thing they knew would only be magnificent for strangers. And here you are, generations later, a stranger, standing in the cool they made. You are the proof their bet paid off. You just never knew you were the prize. The math that says plant only what you will harvest is the math of someone who still secretly believes their time is theirs alone. The people we are talking about, the ones who plant the slow thing well past 40, have quietly switched to a different sum without announcing it. They have stopped asking, will I get to eat this? They have started asking a larger and stranger question. Will this be here, still growing after me? And the second you change the question, the weight you have been carrying lifts off your shoulders. Because now you are not racing the clock. You are not betting your own years against a tree's years and lying awake hoping yours hold out long enough to win. You have stepped out of the race entirely, off the track, into the grass beside it. You are planting time itself, for whoever comes next, and slowly discovering that this is the only kind of planting that was ever going to outlast you in the first place. But there is a first spring coming, a hard one, a spring you may walk straight past without a single bloom to show for any of this. And how you feel on that one particular morning will tell you everything about whether this has truly changed you yet, or whether you only liked the sound of it. The first spring after you plant something slow is a quiet humiliation, and nobody ever warns you about it. Everything else in the garden wakes up at once. The daffodils come back without being asked, in the same corner as last year, cheerful and reliable. The lawn greens almost overnight. The neighbor's cherry tree goes off over the fence like a celebration you did not organize, pink and absurd and impossible to ignore. The whole world seems to be performing. And your slow thing, the one you knelt down for, the one you carried home and did the secret math over, does almost nothing. A few leaves, maybe. A little more height that you can only confirm if you measured, and you did measure, of course you measured, because you are that kind of person now. You stood there with a tape against a twig and felt slightly ridiculous and checked it anyway. There is a particular morning that arrives in that first spring. You walk out with your coffee and it goes cold in your hand while you stand there, and you look at this thin, reluctant stick of a thing, and a thought rises up before you can stop it. Quiet, a little ashamed of itself. What was the point? I want you to remember that exact morning, because it is the test, and most people quietly fail it. Most people need the reward to arrive on their own schedule. We have been trained to, relentlessly, for years. We live in a time where you can want a thing at 9 in the morning and have it on the front step by noon, where a story is no longer a wait stretched out across weeks but a whole season swallowed in a single dark evening. We have slowly forgotten how to be owed something by the future and be at peace about the waiting. So when the slow thing gives nothing back that first spring, the trained part of you reads it instantly as failure. A bad buy, a mistake. But it is not failure, it is roots. It is the busiest, most important work the plant will ever do, happening exactly where you cannot see it. And we have stopped believing in anything we cannot see. Here is the line that can change that morning, if you let it land. You did not plant this for this spring. You planted it for a spring you have not met yet. The cherry over the fence, the show off, the one making you feel foolish, is giving its entire self away right now, this week, all of it at once, and then it is finished and bare until next year. Your slow thing is doing something completely different. It is not performing for anyone. It is building the structure, deep and unglamorous, that will let it give, decades from now, more than that cherry will manage in its whole bright shallow life. There is a reason the wood of a slow-grown tree is the wood people prize. The trees that shoot up fast, that race for the light, end up soft inside, light, easy to split, quick to rot. The slow ones, the ones that took their time, lay down tight, dense rings, year on patient year, and that is the timber that becomes a beam holding up a roof for 200 winters, or the back of a violin still singing long after everyone who built it is gone. Fast and hollow, or slow and strong. The tree decides that in exactly these early seasons, the ones that look like nothing is happening. Slowness is not the absence of growth. Slowness is growth that refuses to be rushed into a shape that cannot last. And the person standing there with the cold coffee, the one who decides not to dig it up, who decides to trust the invisible work and go back inside and let it happen, that person is changing too. Not as fast as they would like, not in any way a photograph would catch, but under the surface, in the place where it actually counts, something in them is taking hold. Because there are two kinds of waiting, and we have confused them for most of our adult lives. There is the kind that wears you thin, the kind you did in waiting rooms and stalled traffic, and on hold with your ear going hot against the phone. And there is another kind entirely, a kind you may not have truly felt since you were small enough to lie awake from joy. To understand the difference between them, and it is the whole difference, you have to go back to what waiting meant to you before life slowly taught you to hate it. There was a time, and you lived in it, when waiting was the best part of everything. Think of the night before something you wanted badly as a child. The way you lay awake, not because you were anxious, but because you were too full to sleep. The wanting was almost better than the having. The morning of a birthday before anyone else in the house was up, lying in the gray early light, feeling the whole enormous day waiting for you on the other side of getting up, like a wrapped box you were not allowed to open yet. That ache, that fullness, you knew it once. Waiting back then always pointed forward into more. You waited to be older, taller, allowed to do the things the bigger ones did. You waited for summer, and summer came, and it was vast beyond measuring. Every wait was a corridor, and every corridor opened into a room bigger than the one you were standing in. Then somewhere along the way, so slowly you never caught it happening, waiting flipped. It became the thing standing between you and what you wanted. A cost, a friction, the hold music, the line at the counter, the years between now and when the children would finally sleep through the night, and then before you had drawn breath, the years between now and when those same children would finally call without being asked. Waiting stopped being a full corridor and became an empty one, a gray hallway to be hurried through, and we learned, every one of us, to make it shorter by any means we could find. We got astonishingly good at it. We removed waiting from almost everything we touch. The message answered in seconds. The film begun the instant you think of it, the meal at the door, and we told ourselves, not without reason, that this was progress. In 1,000 ways it was. But notice, honestly, what we lost when we deleted the wait. We lost the ripening. We lost the long, slow, sweet ache of looking forward to something for weeks. We lost the version of ourselves who could be deeply, quietly happy about a thing that had not happened yet and was not coming soon. You cannot feel that night before your birthday fullness about a thing that arrives in under an hour. There is no room for it. The wait was never the price you paid for the joy. The wait was part of the joy, maybe the larger part. And here is the quiet tragedy hidden inside a life lived entirely fast. When nothing makes you wait, nothing makes you look forward. And a life with nothing real to look forward to begins to feel strangely short, even when the calendar says it has been long. The days run together because none of them is leaning toward anything. This is the thing the slow planter stumbles back into, usually without ever naming it. When you put something in the ground that will take years, you have deliberately, with your own hands, built a weight back into your life. You have given yourself, on purpose, a thing to look forward to that is absolutely not coming this week, or this month, or this year. You have reinstalled the corridor you thought you had lost when you grew up. And the first time you wander out in the morning to check on it, not because it has done anything overnight, not for any reason at all except that you wanted to see it, you feel something you may not have felt in decades. The simple fullness of being owed a future, of having something out ahead of you waiting, the way the birthday once waited. The same waiting that wears you down in a parking lot can lift you up in a garden. The exact same act, the opposite weight. And the difference between those two weights is the whole secret of the second half of a life. But to truly feel why one waiting crushes and the other lifts, you have to go underground, to the part of all this that no one ever sees, and that almost everyone forgets is even happening at all. For the first few years, the single most important thing your slow plant is doing is something you will never once witness with your own eyes. While the part above the soil sits there looking lazy, barely changing week to week, almost daring you to give up on it, the part below the surface is on fire with work. It is sending roots down and out into the dark, feeling its way blind through the soil, wrapping around stones, anchoring itself against storms that have not arrived, hunting for water it will need in a drought that is still years off. It is laying the foundation for a size it has not yet begun to hint at above the ground. A young tree spends its early life poor above and rich below. It looks, to anyone glancing at it, like nothing at all is happening, precisely because everything that is happening is hidden from view. Now stop and notice how exactly that describes a stretch of your own life. There were years, and maybe you are standing inside them right now, that looked like nothing from the outside. No promotion to announce, no milestone to photograph, no visible bloom anyone could point to. Years a younger, more impatient version of you would have written off as wasted, as treading water, as falling behind. And only much later, looking back from higher ground, did you understand that those flat, quiet years were exactly when your roots went down. When you quietly became someone who could hold weight without cracking. The growth was real and it was enormous. It simply happened underground, where no one, including you, could applaud it. We judge ourselves and everything around us by what shows above the soil, the flower, the result, the proof you can hold up. And so we tear up the slow things in the garden and in our own lives, right at the moment the invisible work is almost finished. We give up one season early. We always have. Here is a number worth holding onto. There are trees whose first 3 years above ground add almost nothing a passing eye would notice, and then comes a single later year where they suddenly leap upward fast, because the root system has finally finished its long patient work and the whole machine has switched on at once. The leap looks sudden to anyone watching. It was not sudden. It was paid for quietly in full across the years that looked like failure. You have almost certainly been the person who quit one root year too early. Most of us have, more than once. The practice abandoned in the dull stretch right before it would have clicked. The slow, careful repair of something between you and another person, dropped in the flat silence right before it would have caught and held. We mistake the underground season for the end of the story, when it is only the part of the story we are not allowed to see. The slow plant teaches the exact opposite, and it teaches it patiently, season after season, until you finally believe it. It teaches you to trust the unseen, to believe that something real is being built even when the surface offers you nothing, no sign, no reward, no proof. To stop reading flatness as failure and start reading it as foundation. And once you can trust the underground in a tree, something quietly remarkable happens. You start to trust it again in yourself. You stop panicking in your own quiet years. You begin to suspect on good days that you too might simply be rooting in some way you cannot see and do not need to. Which finally, at last, brings us to the thing itself. The one slow thing genuinely worth planting after 40. I have made you wait a long time for its plain name on purpose, exactly the way the rest of this asks you to wait for everything good. And now, at last, it is time to dig it up into the light. Plant a tree. That is the one thing. Not the easy, fast things, though by all means grow those too. Fill your beds with them. Not a tray of bright color that is spent in brown by August. A tree. The slowest, most stubborn, most quietly absurd long bet a pair of human hands can make in a single, ordinary afternoon. I know exactly how plain that sounds now that it is finally said out loud. You waited all this time for two small words you already knew before you ever started, but you did not know them like this. And here, precisely, is the difference that makes them worth the wait. People plant flowers for themselves for this season, for the pleasure of the next few months. People plant vegetables for the summer, for the table, for the year. But a tree is the only thing most of us will ever put into the ground that is openly, unmistakably, unapologetically for after. It does not pretend the reward is yours. It does not flatter you. It tells you the truth to your face on the very day you carry it home. You will not see me finished. And then it asks you, quietly, to plant it anyway. Nothing else you can do with your two hands makes that bargain so honestly, so completely without flinching. And it does not have to be an oak that will outlive your grandchildren's grandchildren. Though if you have the room and the nerve, plant that too. Plant the biggest, slowest thing you can. It can be an apple, a pear against a warm wall. A walnut you will be silver-haired and slow beside before it carries a single nut worth cracking. A cherry, a plum, a slow ornamental thing that will simply be beautiful long after you. Choose it by how long you can bear to wait, because the waiting is the entire point. It is the feature, not the flaw in the plan. Here is what actually happens to the person who does it. The tree slowly becomes a clock you genuinely want to read. Think about how rare that is. Most clocks past 40 make you flinch a little when you catch sight of them because they all count down. This one counts up. Every single year it is taller, not you shorter. It quietly turns the passing of time, the one thing you had started to dread in the small hours, into the very thing you put on your boots and walk outside to admire. It gives you a reason to still be here in 10 years that is gentle and concrete and entirely your own. Not a grim white-knuckled hope. A standing appointment. You and that tree, on some ordinary morning a full decade out from now. Both a little bigger than today, both still here, still standing in the same patch of ground. And it quietly rewrites the whole secret math we talked about. You stop measuring your own years against the tree's years as a race you are slowly losing. The tree was never racing you. It is not your rival. It is keeping you company. It is the one thing in your whole life that is openly, honestly built to carry on the work after your hands have stopped. And there turns out to be a deep and genuine relief, one you never expected, in handing something that job and trusting it to do it. A person who plants a tree at 50 is not being naive about their own time. That is the thing people get backward. They are being more honest about it than anyone and more generous with it in the very same motion of the wrist. So that is the one thing, a tree, said plainly at last after all that waiting. But I promised you something larger than just what to plant. I promised you why the waiting that follows feels different from any waiting you have ever done before in your life. And that, the real beating heart of all of this, is exactly what comes next. Here is the turn, and it is the whole reason any of this matters at all. When you wait for a thing that you know will arrive comfortably inside your own lifetime, you are always, underneath, waiting toward an end. The wait is a tunnel with a light at the far end of it, and the entire time you are leaning forward, straining, wishing the tunnel shorter, living a little bit outside the present moment because the good part, the real part, is up ahead and not yet here. You are spending the wait, not living in it. But when you plant a tree well past 40, you are waiting for something whose finished form you understand you may never actually stand inside. There is no light at the end of this particular tunnel that you can be certain of reaching. And the astonishing thing, the thing almost nobody tells you, is that this does not make the waiting worse. It makes it better. Completely, strangely better. Because once the end is no longer the point, you are handed back the middle. You are returned to now. To the actual ordinary morning you happen to be standing in, coffee in hand, dew on your boots. Think it through slowly. If you are not waiting to harvest, then there is nothing out ahead to lean into, nothing to strain toward, no finish line pulling you out of the present. The tree is not a delayed reward you are impatiently tapping your foot for. It is a companion you simply get to visit today, exactly as it is right now, small and unfinished and unmistakably alive. The waiting stops being a corridor rushing you towards somewhere else and quietly becomes a room you are genuinely happy to sit in. That is the flip. That is the whole thing. Ordinary waiting whispers the good part is later, so hurry, so endure this, so get through it. This new waiting says something else entirely. The good part is the watching, so stay right here. A person waiting for a kettle to boil is somewhere else in their mind, already 3 steps ahead, mildly annoyed at the present for being slow. A person standing in the cool morning watching a tree they planted with their own hands is exactly, completely where they are. Same verb, the same act of waiting, 2 entirely different lives being lived inside it. This is the part that takes a while to believe, so let it sit. The tree did not give you more years. It gave you back the ones you were already living and not noticing. The morning was always going to happen. The light was always going to fall through those branches just so. You simply had no reason to step outside and stand in it until something out there was slowly becoming and quietly waiting on your company to do it. And this, finally, is why it does what it does to time itself. We said early on that time speeds up as you age, and it does, and here is the real reason. The days stop having edges. One blurs into the next with nothing to mark where it ended and the next began, and a year of unmarked days vanishes like water through open fingers. The tree puts the edges back. It hands you a season to notice, a first green leaf to watch for in spring, a particular morning the blossom opens, a slow, visible, undeniable proof that this year was not the same as last year. It makes time legible again, readable, a thing with chapters. And time you can read passes far more slowly than time that simply leaks away unmeasured. So you end up holding the strangest gift, one that sounds like a contradiction until you have lived it. By planting the slowest possible thing, the one thing whose ending you cannot count on being there for, you get more of the present, not less. You get the days back. You wanted the years to stop racing past you. You felt them accelerating and it frightened you. But the way to slow them down was never to reach out and grab the future faster, to consume more, to finish things sooner. It was the opposite. It was to plant something so slow that it gives you a real reason to look, closely and gladly and often, at right now. The waiting feels different because you are no longer waiting to receive anything. You are waiting to accompany, to keep company. And accompanying, unlike receiving, has no deadline you can ever fail. There is one more thing left, and it is the part that surprised me most of all when I finally understood it. It is about who actually does this. Because the people who plant the very latest, with the very least time left to enjoy any of it, turn out to be the ones who understand everything we have just said the most deeply of all. Watch who is actually out there planting trees in their 70s and their 80s, and you will see something that refuses to fit the story we are all told about getting old. We are told in 100 quiet ways that the old hold on tighter, grow more careful, stop starting things, pull inward, count their losses. And yet there they are, out in the cold spring soil. Someone with thin spotted hands and a knee that no longer bends the way it should, lowering a sapling into a hole they will be gone long before it fills. By every cold measure of self-interest, it makes no sense whatsoever. They have the least runway left of anyone alive, and they are out there planting the single longest thing a person can plant. There's an old line about this, worn smooth and round from being passed hand to hand for generations. A traveler comes upon someone very old planting trees, fruit trees that take many years to bear, and asks, not unkindly, why they bother with fruit they will so plainly never live to taste. And the answer is always some version of the same quiet thing. When I was born, there were trees already grown, fruit already ripe, planted by people I never met and never thanked. I am simply doing for the ones coming what was done for me. That is not resignation. Listen closely to it, and you will hear that it is the exact opposite of resignation. It is one of the most defiant things a person can possibly do with their hands. It is standing right at the edge of your own certain ending, looking straight at it, and choosing to act as though the world goes on regardless, and to push something good and living into that world precisely because you will not be there to collect a thing from it. And here is the quiet reward that comes back, the one none of them ever asks for and most never speak about. The people who plant for after are, by nearly every account, noticeably less afraid of the after, not because they have stopped loving being alive, far from it, but because they have already, with their own hands, sent a part of themselves forward, out past the line that frightens everyone else into silence. A piece of them is already out ahead, rooted in the ground, growing slowly, waiting patiently on the far side of the very thing the rest of us cannot bring ourselves to look at. They have made the future into a place they already quietly live, instead of merely a place where they end. And you do not have to be 80 to be handed that. That is the entire point of doing it at 40, or at 50, or at whatever number you happen to be right now and have quietly, privately been treating as already too late. Too late is the lie that keeps your hands empty and your present small. There is no age at which planting a slow living thing stops working its strange, gentle change on the person who plants it. There is only ever the age you are today, and the choice sitting there in front of you, and the patient waiting ground. There is a quiet kind of person you have probably met without noticing what made them different. Someone well into their later years who somehow still seems lit from inside, still curious, still leaning gently toward tomorrow instead of bracing against it. And if you look closely at how they actually live, you will almost always find the same thing somewhere in it. Something planted, something started that they will not see finished. A long project, a young orchard, a slow thing tended without any expectation of collecting. They have not made peace with time by giving up on the future. They have made peace with it by quietly investing in a future that runs on past them and feeling themselves connected to it every single day. The youngest thing you can possibly do, it turns out, the thing that keeps a person green inside, is to plant something for a future you know full well you will not own. So picture them one more time, those late planters, the ones with the bad knees and the long view. Kneeling carefully, slowly, because kneeling is not a simple thing anymore. Settling one small living thing down into the dark, cool soil and pressing it firm with both old hands. It looks exactly like the image we started all of this with. It always did. The only thing that has changed is you. Now you know what is really happening down there in the grass. So come all the way back to the beginning now. Back to you, kneeling in the cool grass at the end of a long day, with something small and alive cupped in your hands, doing the quiet, involuntary math of years. Only now the math is different because everything underneath it has shifted. You are no longer counting whether you will be there at the end of it. You have set that question down in the grass beside you. You are not racing the tree, and you are not racing the clock, and you have stopped trying to win a race that was never yours to win. You are just here, in the falling evening light, with dirt drying on your hands and a small living thing settling into the ground that will go on long without you, and is glad, tonight, simply of your company. The thing you have planted will not be finished in your time. You understand that fully now, and you understand at last that this is not the catch hidden in the gift. It is the gift. It is the only reason the waiting turned soft in your hands. The only reason the days got their edges back and stopped running together. The only reason you can stand in a garden at 50 or 60 or 70 and feel time slow itself down to the patient pace of a single leaf unfolding. You came out here this evening to plant a tree, but what you actually planted, without quite meaning to, was a reason to keep looking forward, on a morning when looking forward had quietly started to frighten you. Notice your own hands now in the last of the light. They are older than they used to be. You can see it plainly. They are pressing soil down around roots they will almost certainly never see grown to their full height. And the strange thing, the thing you will carry inside when you finally go in, is that they are not heavy with it. They are not grieving. They are doing the lightest, freest, most unburdened thing a pair of human hands can do. You wanted, when this began, to understand why waiting feels so different after 40. Here is your answer. It is right there, in the grass, in your hands, in the small green thing that will outlast this moment and outlast the season and in the end, outlast you. You stop counting how much time you have left the day. You start planting things that will outlive you.